If you follow me on Instagram, you would usually see me posting photos of my ants or adding polls to my stories. I then put some of these stories on my highlights where you can check them for yourself at any time. But one day, I decided to do something different and include some of you guys that follow me in a YouTube video. So here we are now with ant keeping tips from myself and fellow ant keepers. So before you even go out there and look for a queen, it's best to do your research first. There are already a handful of tutorials out there, including mine that you should check out on my channel later, that explain how to catch and raise your queen ant. Here are some words of the wise from fellow ant keeper Ningen. Start with a simple species. There are so many people in this world who just started the hobby and are already thinking of shipping a new exotic queen ant/ant colony. Why not just start the hobby with a Lasius or another easy to keep species instead of starting with one of a heck hard to keep ants, even if it's native or not. Speaking of Lasius, I have a full playlist on them on my channel. Really easy to care for and aggressive ants. You would have to be really irresponsible for them to die. But I'll let ants._.uk to tell you more about 2 species of this genus.
Thank you for having me on Ender Ants. So today I'm going to be talking about 2 species that are very easy to keep that are native to Europe because this year's nuptial flight in the Northern Hemisphere is coming up. So the 2 species I'm talking about are Lasius niger and Lasius flavus. So Lasius niger is larger than Lasius flavus, and also Lasius niger is a black to brown colour, whereas Lasius flavus is orange to yellow colour. Now, Lasius niger is a lot more outgoing and active compared to Lasius flavus. This is because in the wild, Lasius flavus typically lives underground tending to root aphids, whereas Lasius niger leaves the ground and looks on surface for food. In captivity though, they are very similar in care and very easy, like I said, only a few little differences between their care. So the first difference is Lasius flavus lives in colder regions than Lasius niger, so you would like to keep their temperature slightly lower, but when I say slightly, I mean slightly. And also Lasius flavus is a smaller species of ant obviously, so they might be able to get out of smaller gaps, so you would have to keep it more escape proof. The care for them both is very similar. They both eat normal foods such as honey, insects, and they are quite fast growing, but obviously they need to hibernate every year. So that's the basic care for Lasius niger and Lasius flavus. Thank you for having me on Ender Ants. Hope you have a good ant keeping season.
Now that you have done your research and scoured the lands for test tubes in the Amazon, you are ready to look for a queen ant. Of course, you'll need to bring equipment on this search. Your very first items you should bring are test tubes, cotton, and a flashlight if you're going out at night. If you don't have test tubes, use empty water bottles. The queen can drink any small droplets left in the bottle if she were to stay there for a while. Here's what Ningen said about this. Always bring a test tube with you. You never know when you will find a queen. One day, I saw a really beautiful queen ant. It was midwinter and I had no way of catching her. Catch as many queens as you can. Then, there's a good chance that at least one of them is capable of passing through the foundation/founding stage. You can always sell them or release them if you have too many. If you're having trouble catching the queen, you can use cotton balls to safely hold her and place her in the test tube. Just be careful and not squeeze too hard or else you will crush the queen. And nobody wants a crushed queen. If you don't have any cotton balls, I use 2 different hand formations to allow the queen to crawl onto me. One of these is the cradle method, as I call it. You cup the test tube in between your hands and wait. Usually, queens crawl onto my fingers doing this, but it won't always work. Also take caution when handling with biting or stinging queen ants, since they can think of you as a danger to them. Another technique is the triangle method, where you form a triangle with your hands. Pretty much all you have to do is surround the queen with your hands so that she can crawl onto you. Again, be careful doing this with aggressive species. Also, if you caught a queen that is more destructive, Manitoba Ant 15 says, use PVE foam or sponges instead of cotton because it's harder to chew through. Let's now talk about when you should go out to find queen ants. If you watched my hunting queen ants video, I go over my tips of when I go looking for queens. Now I usually look for queen ants at night since they get attracted to the lights. But what I would take from this is to go out when it is warm and humid right after a rain. And I would say the same for the beginning and middle of the day.
Hello, it's me, Ant Suffolk, and I have been ant keeping for about 10 years now, and from my past experience I have got 5 tips on how to keep ants. Tip number 1. Always keep them in darkness. It stresses the queen and the colony out thinking they are outside and have to move. It's a big issue because if they escape they can kill your younger colonies and damage your house.
Ant keeping is so much fun. I know that starting the ant colony is for some of you hard. If you have queen ant in the tubes, I really recommend to you to not look at them for 2 weeks or longer.
Once you've successfully caught the queen, you have to face one of the hardest challenges known to ant keepers, and that is not checking on her. Here are some more words of the wise from fellow ant keeper Snom McDannon. Be patient. I made so many mistakes just because I wanted to make my colony move to a new test tube ASAP, or just check my newly caught queens every single day. Keep in mind that not checking on the queen can result in more eggs and more workers. You can keep your colonies in a drawer or on a shelf like I do. Really, any place where there's no disruptions.
Tip number 2. Water. Water is so important for ants, especially ones not adapted to dry climates. It's essential you always have a source of water for your ants. It also helps the ants clean their larvae and eggs so they don't mold.
I can't stress this one enough, guys. Make sure you keep your colonies hydrated. A lack of water has killed most of my colonies, so never forget about it. What I do from now on is leave a water-filled test tube in my setups. I also leave these liquid feeders from Formica in there too.
Tip number 3. Carbohydrates. Carbohydrates are very good for your ants. It keeps the workers alive and happy. There are also species that require seeds instead of sugar. It's the same thing, and ants eat the seeds like the carbohydrates. It's not bad that your ants don't get some honey for a couple days because these clever little insects always have something at their nest, such as repletes.
Just as Ant Suffolk said, sugar makes the workers happy. When giving your ants sugar, let's say honey for example, make sure the droplets aren't too large because some species can get stuck and drown. Larvae on the other hand, and also the queen, need protein to grow.
Tip number 4. Proteins. Proteins are what makes the colony grow and it is eaten by the queen and larva. The queen eats the protein for egg laying and the larva eats them to grow. When the colony reaches a certain size, it is unbelievable how much protein they devour and eat so fast, so feed your ants regularly.
Without protein, the larva will grow slowly and the queen will lay eggs at a slower rate. Feeding your ants insects are a good choice because that's their natural prey. Here's what Snom McDannon had to say about this. Be careful with the insects you give your ants. It's very easy to find a dead insect that was probably killed by pesticides, which are very dangerous to your ants. I usually get my insects in places which I know are not sprayed with pesticides. It's also much easier to have your own culture of feeders to give your ants if you're insured. So by now we've covered the 3 main things about ant keeping. Next I'm going to cover moving your colony. You can go about this by either moving the test tube into a tubs and tube setup like what I do, or move them into a formicarium. Personally, I feel the best step is to move them into a tubs and tube setup. This gives them an outworld, more space, more test tubes you can put in, and also gives you an easier way to feed them. But if you're moving them into a formicarium, don't give them too much space. One day, I gave one of my ant colonies a really big founding nest, and it started to get really moldy and dirty, and they didn't use most of the space I had given them. And now, finally, the last tip we have for you is temperature.
Tip number 5, temperature. Temperature is vital for your colony's growth. High temperature speeds up the larva development and makes the colony more active, but don't mess around with it. I recommend nothing above 30 degrees and nothing below 20 degrees. And if you have ants from warm regions, give them a heat mat, cable or light bulb. Use Google to find the right temperatures. I hope you enjoy my top 5 tips on keeping ants. Goodbye.
But heating ants can be risky. A lot of times it can lead to deaths from overheating. So make sure you test out if your ants like the temperature by only heating one side of it first. I haven't used a heating pad yet, so I can't give much advice, but I have heard a lot of species grow quicker when given more heat. Now, hibernation is another part of ant keeping I don't know too much about. I have tried out once in my first year of ant keeping when I put them in a wine fridge at 60 degrees Fahrenheit, but then again I lost a queen during that, so I stopped doing it. But what I would tell people is that if it snows where you live, or it gets below 40 degrees during the winter, hibernate your ants by putting them in a cold place. Make sure you check on them periodically too, just in case they're not doing too good. Special thanks to those who are a part of this video. I left their @s in the description and comment section if you want to go follow them. For those still watching, let me know if you want me to do this again and if you want to be featured in that one. Hope you are all staying safe, hydrated, and caring more to your colonies. My name is Ender Ants, say it with me now, your fellow ant YouTuber. Thanks for watching, and I hope you enjoyed.